Thank you so much to the Asian Pacific American Library Association for this award, and thanks especially to the Youth Literature Award Committee, Crystal Chen, Danilo Balin, Anna Coates, Tamika Welch, and Jen Wu. I am so honored to accept this award for last night at the Telegraph Club. My family and I came to this country from China when I was 3.5 years old. We landed in Boulder, Colorado, where my grandmother's college roommate lived. She offered to help us out when we arrived. So that's where we went. So my grandmother, I'm talking about my Nai here, my paternal grandmother. She was an American. She was white. She met my grandfather, a Chinese man, when they were both students at the University of Chicago in the 1930s. At the time, due to anti-miscegenation laws, it was actually illegal for them to marry in the US. So, in 1937, they were married in Shanghai, just days before the Japanese invaded. They fled to Western China, where they lived as refugees during World War II. In 1944, my grandmother was evacuated by the US military and came back to America, where she gave birth to my father. My grandfather followed in 1946 after the end of the war, but they didn't actually stay in America. It turns out that my grandfather, who had gotten a temporary teaching job at a small college in Pennsylvania, wasn't being paid equally. So, in 1947, they moved back to China. They wanted to help their country rebuild after the war. They didn't know that the communists would take over in 1949 and that China would be closed off to the rest of the world for decades. My grandfather died there during the Cultural Revolution. After the death of Mao Zedong, my grandmother finally was able to get permission for my family to leave China and return to the US in 1978. So we came. I grew up in a predominantly white community in Colorado, and the other kids made fun of my Chinese name, so I chose an American one. That's why my name is Malinda. There was no Asian American community where I grew up, and I didn't find one until I went to college. And when I got there, I realized I wasn't quite like the other Asian Americans. The Chinese Americans I met were mostly from Taiwan, or their families had been here for generations. They grew up in Chinatowns or in California. And there was another hitch. When I realized that I'm a lesbian, I felt like I didn't quite belong in the Asian American community. It seemed so straight. It felt a little bit like being queer was the family secret that you don't talk about. But as I've gotten older, I have found my community. I've found other queer Asian Americans. We do exist, and it's not a secret anymore. I've always wanted to see myself in the Asian American story, but I've also wanted that story to be a little bit bigger, a little bit more inclusive. So, in Last Night at the Telegraph Club, I created a character with a family inspired by my family's immigration story, only flipped. My family went back to China in 1947, but what if they had stayed in America? That's what happens in this book. And I didn't stop there. Queer Chinese Americans exist now, and I knew that we existed in the 1950s too. While I was researching this book, I even talked to a couple of real-life queer Chinese American women who lived in San Francisco in the 1950s and 60s. Writing this book enabled me to not only imagine myself into the Asian American community, but it enabled me to find evidence that queer Asian Americans have been here for decades. I know that as Asian Americans, you understand how alienating it is to be rendered invisible in our own country. So it's deeply meaningful to me to receive this award because it makes me feel seen by my community. Thank you for reading Lily's story and for loving it. Thank you for recognizing my work.